Hello and welcome to From the Spine to the Mind, where we talk about books. Today I'll be going over 9 books that give a glimpse into the Black experience in America. And I say a glimpse because our experience is so much greater than the sum of our traumas and our pain, but that trauma and pain is often diminished or even erased from history. So I do want to shed some light on it. Now, all of these I consider classic if they're not already classified as such, but it gives a glimpse of the experience both historically and presently. um, I hope one of these books interests you, and if you've read one already, let me know what you felt about it. Or it doesn't have to be one, but just tell me if you've read any of these books and how you felt about them. Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Now, if you've watched my last video, my favorite books of 2024, you will know that Butler is now one of my all-time favorite authors. You will frequently hear me refer to her as the GOAT because it's true. So far, I've only read the Earthseed series. Actually, not even so far, because I've read now 4. So I've read the Earthseed series, Kindred, and last week I read Fledgling. Now, this tells a story about, I think she's 26, a 26-year-old. She's in the 1970s, and on her birthday, and when she moves into a house with her husband, she is suddenly transported back to the early 1800s. Now, if you're Taylor Swift, you're living out your wildest dreams. If you are a Black woman being transported to the antebellum South, you were living your worst nightmare. This was a very emotional read for me, and Octavia E. Butler has this way of, even if you aren't super into the story with your heart at the beginning, you'll come to realize every single page that pushes you forward just further clenches its hand around your heart. It got to the point where I was like, stop. I am begging you right now to stop, and I'm tearing up right now just thinking about it. But this is an adventure, and one thing about adventures, they don't have to be fun. They don't have to be happy. This was just one of those. It was almost like a horror novel. You genuinely had no idea what was going to come next, but you were afraid to look around the corner because you just didn't know what was going to be waiting for you. Now, one of my favorite quotes from this was, South African whites had always struck me as people who would have been happier living in the 19th century or the 18th. In fact, they were living in the past as far as their race relations went. They lived in ease and comfort, supported by huge numbers of blacks whom they kept in poverty and held in contempt. Tom Whalen would have felt right at home. This kind of reminded me of a book that I will talk about later on, Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis, in the sense that our histories are tied together. And when you fail to properly abolish a system at the start, you'll come to realize that in the present day, a lot of things that could have been resolved then are now happening now. So I would highly, highly recommend this book, not only because it is just an important read, it's by one of the best authors. So check it out. Just a fair warning, most of these books are probably going to make me tear up just because all of them made me feel very deeply. Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. This was one of the first books that I read to get back into reading. I don't even really know what inspired me to pick it up, because this was unfortunately before I even really got into history, wanting to have more of just that outline that school provided me with. I wanted to start filling in that shape with ideas and thoughts of my own, and I decided to pick this up, and it covers the early 1800s, and it's showing you Frederick Douglass's life as he was a young boy and then a young man in slavery, and then how he came to be educated and realized that he was in fact a slave. This book brought up a lot of interesting points for me. One thing that I always heard that infuriated me was that when the white people would say, oh, you can't educate the black people, the slaves, because it's bad for them. It'll turn them into bad slaves. And Frederick Douglass essentially agreed with that. After he became educated, he realized the state of his condition. But another thing that he realized is that there's no way to change it. And him realizing that just absolutely broke my heart, and having to shift my brain, not looking at it from the white person's perspective, but from Frederick Douglass's perspective of realizing that I don't agree with it for the reasons that they gave, but I agreed with that heartbreaking reality of having to face that. And another thing that it kind of emphasized for me, and I actually used this book for a paper that I wrote, where a teacher asked us if we thought that racism was a form of mental illness. And I made the argument of, yes, of course, without a doubt. If you can convince yourself of something so deeply that it can justify you enslaving people, raping people, murdering people, torturing people, you are mentally ill. If you allow these events to make you say, this is not a human. This is not a human. I can do whatever I want to you. You are mentally ill. If you can look at someone in a different country and say, they're not deserving of this. They're not deserving of this land, of their culture, of their language, of their life. You are mentally ill. And that was something that was emphasized in this book for me. This is a book where, even though I already know the story, I do want to return to it just because I read this maybe 3 years ago now, and my brain still goes back to this story. Not story, to this history, to this moment of history. And it's just the fact that it's just a tiny etch in the cloth of humanity, but it's an etch that deserves to be highlighted, that deserves to be celebrated, not just during 1 month out of the entire year, but these are the books that people need to read, not books that need to be banned. The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man by James Weldon Johnson. Now, this is another book that I read very early on into my reading journey, and I should have known from here that I was going to be a complete... this is kind of a serious video. I usually say that I'm a hoe for prose, but that feels a little bit... anywho, it's out there. But I should have known from then just how much prose is going to mean to me, because this book, I started to reread it about a month ago. I need to finish it. It's not because I love it. It's one of my favorite books, but this is the first book that I've ever attempted to reread, and that's one thing that I'm working on. But anyway, this book, oh my gosh. I talk about the prose because one of the things that really got me was that not only was it just beautifully written, but the way that Johnson kind of lulls you into this sense of comfort and hope. And I remember, because this little black boy discovers that he is black in a very embarrassing way, and it kind of makes him resent himself and resent the fact that he is black. But he reaches a point where he says, I want to bring honor to my race. I'm proud of who I am. And you follow him as he's growing up. He's maturing. He's becoming a young black man, a proud young black man. I just got to this point where I was like, man, wait, this is so great. I'm loving this. Like, he's learning Spanish. I love Spanish. I one day want to be fluent in Spanish. And then I remember the title, The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. And it made me realize that something is going to happen to this young black man that's going to make him feel as though he has to kill a part of himself. He can no longer be the person that he once was. And that absolutely broke my heart. One of my favorite quotes in this book, that just about any time I make a post about this book, this is the one that I use, just because it hits me so deeply. It says, "Do you know I don't object to anyone's having prejudice so long as those prejudices don't interfere with my personal liberty?" I absolutely love that, because it's like, if you feel some type of way, I can't change the way you feel, but when your feelings start to decide your actions and your actions are negatively affecting me, that's where I have a problem. And I feel like that is something present day that we deal with. That's why I love reading classics, because it is both frustrating but also validating when you can read something and someone can be feeling the same way that you did across centuries. I just find that so beautiful. Invisble Man by Ralph Ellison, not to be confused with The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. Just want to throw that out there. Honestly, this one is 10 times better. Do what you want with that. Anyway, so this is a satirical literary fiction coming of age story about a young black man just trying to find his place in this world. He wants to be educated, he wants to be successful, And you follow him as he's trying to figure out the best way to do that. Now, he encounters some of the most unbelievable, unlucky situations with this interesting cast of characters around him, and it is a journey. Now, the quote that I love from this that I feel like sums up pretty much the journey of the character was, "What and how much had I lost by trying to do only what was expected of me instead of what I myself had wished to do?" Now, this is a quote that I resonated with so deeply because I feel like that's something that has been carried down from generation to generation until we have, met it ourselves in this one. Now, this covers the 1920s and 30s, and it kind of goes into the autobiography of an ex-colored man where that character, also nameless, both of these characters were nameless. You never figure out their identity, which is kind of goes into that invisibility. So in the autobiography of an ex-colored man, he felt that he had to make himself invisible. And in this one, you go along with the character as he realizes that he is invisible to those around him. Everyone fills him in with the colors or the images that they desire to see him as versus trying to figure out who he was. This is a story that I feel like needs to be studied. This is not a book that you want to breeze through. This is a book that you really need to sit and think about what is being presented to you and why. I don't recommend this book to everyone because of that reason, but this is a book that I so desperately want to reread because I know I did not get everything out of it that I could, and I look forward to seeing what else I can get out of it. I also just love this edition. Like, I just feel like the margins, the sizing, I just love it so much. And this was one of the only books that I tabbed. I think I've only tabbed like 4 books, but yeah, I look forward to going back through this. This book is almost 600 pages. That's wild. But yeah, I loved every moment of it. Always in my face, talking this and that. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is another favorite book of 2024 for me, and just now one of my all-time favorite books, just because of all of the themes that it covered, like the racism, the oppression, the domestic violence, self-hatred, journey to loving yourself, colonization, sisterhood. It is packed full of themes, and they're just seamlessly woven together to create just such an interesting and heartbreaking narrative. There are so many moments in this book where if I start to think too deeply about it, it's gonna break me. But one of my favorite quotes from this was, "There's so much we don't understand, and so much unhappiness comes because of that." Now, this covers the early 1900s to the late 1940s, and this once again connected back to me with Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, because it goes into that, is ignorance bliss? I recently got into a debate about if ignorance is bliss with a friend, and one thing that I was telling them was that just because you aren't aware of why you were feeling bad doesn't take away the fact that you are feeling bad. And just because you're not educated enough to realize things that may be going on around you doesn't change the fact of how negatively they may be impacting you. So, no, just because you don't know what it is doesn't mean that it makes it any easier to deal with. And a lot of times it makes you even more unhappy because you don't even realize why you're having to go through this. This is another book that I plan to return to just because I feel like there's a lot more that I can get out of it, even though this was a 5-star read for me. Most of these books are not less than 4.5 stars. So I absolutely loved all of these books and I would highly recommend them. And yeah, I do want to continue this series. No one ever talks about the fact that it's a series, so I do want to dive back into this world. Beloved, nope. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Now, this is a book that focuses on how racism has affected the beauty standard, but it also covers so much more. You have, I don't even want to say that word. You have inappropriate sexual relationships, you have domestic violence, self-hatred. The Bluest Eye covers the early 1940s, and one of my favorite quotes was, "I had only one desire, to dismember it, to see of what it was made, to discover the dearness, to find the beauty, the desirability that had escaped me, but apparently only me." That pretty much sums up the feelings of little Pecola in this story. She so desperately just wanted to be seen as beautiful as desired. Even her mother showed more love and affection to the white child that she was in charge of helping. And she just wanted the bluest eyes because she felt like that was the only way that she could be seen in that light. And this is another favorite, all-time favorite and favorite from last year, just because of not only Toni Morrison's prose, but just the story and how she connected all of these different characters together to show how this racism and these beauty standards have affected different people in different ways. You know, some are saying like, I don't care about the beauty standard, to hell with it, I am who I am. And you have other people who have learned to adapt and look down on people with the same contempt as the white people. And Toni Morrison is an author that I plan to go through all of their books. I'm getting to Beloved this month and I'm very excited. But yeah. A Lesson Before Dying by Ernest Gaines. Now, this tells a story about a young black man who is wrongly accused of murdering a white man, and he is sentenced to death. Now, while trying to get him out of prison, his lawyer makes the argument that, you know, he's a hog. You don't punish a hog for acting like a hog. And that kind of goes into back to the fact that black people were not seen as human. They were seen as kind of like a mule or a horse, like they're a means to an end. If your horse breaks its leg, you have to put it down. Okay, cool, we can go get another horse. They were not seen as human at this point of time. We were not seen as human. So his grandmother wants the local teacher to give her grandson a lesson before dying so that he can die with dignity, die knowing that he is a man. And this story just absolutely broke my heart because it's set in the late 1940s. And once again, it's going to be brought up in Freedom is a Constant Struggle. But when you don't abolish a system in its entirety, if you only focus on the individual moments of racism, this is the result, where you have a young black boy who is unjustly accused, tried, and then sentenced to death. Then the system was never defeated. You simply made it go through a different tunnel, but it is still alive and well. And that's kind of the point that you will get from all of these books, that slavery did not end racism. The abolishment of slavery just forced racism to have to put on a new face. That's all it did. A quote from this that, once again, there's no point in me saying that it resonated with me, because the reason why I like it is because it resonated with me. But the quote that I love from this was, "I want you to show them the difference between what they think you are and what you can be." And that circles back to Invisble Man by Ralph Ellison. He was trying so hard to be who he thought that they wanted him to be, versus just being himself and saying, I am content with myself whether they like it or not. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is another favorite from last year. And Coates is a generational talent. I hope that he is an author that will continue to just put out amazing books. I have The Water Dancer, I believe that's what it's called. I'm hoping to get to that this month. And this book covers the 1980s to early 2000s, and it's nonfiction. The next two books are my nonfiction. Actually, Frederick Douglass was nonfiction as well. Ignore that. Okay. It's what I described as a love letter to his son. It's showing his son his experience as a black boy and then a black man in America, and the trauma that he had to see, but also how racism has affected the community in both the neighborhoods, in the schools, in the streets, in the prisons. And once again, going into freedom is a constant struggle. And one of the things that he said was, one cannot at once claim to be superhuman and then plead mortal error. I propose to take our countrymen's claims of American exceptionalism seriously, which is to say, I propose subjecting our country to an exceptional moral standard. That really, really hit me, because there was another book that I read. I'm trying to remember what it was, but pretty much it said that it might have been this one, but kind of we use good intentions as a hall pass to the atrocities that have been committed. We tried our best, but unfortunately, thousands had to die as a result. Not only did I just love this writing, it covered so many stories and drew so many parallels to the way that I feel and think that I truly felt seen. Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Y. Davis. This is a new all-time favorite. I just finished this week, and I knew maybe 20 pages in that this was going to be a new favorite. This covers so much in such a short period of time, and it just shows just how amazing and intellectual that Davis is. And I hate that she was one of those people who was just not emphasized and talked about when I was growing up. And I see the reason why, especially in school. They put her on the top 10 most wanted list. They put her in prison. And despite that, she never stopped fighting, because freedom is a constant struggle. One of the things that I loved greatest about this, because it is something that is happening at this moment, is the need for transnational solidarity. And the quote that kind of emphasized the reason why is that our histories never unfold in isolation. We cannot truly tell what we consider to be our own histories without knowing the other stories, and often we discover that those other stories are actually our own. That is something that was emphasized to me in also the Jakarta method. I have not finished the Jakarta method, but one of the things was that we used to learn about these places that were war-torn and just filled with poverty, and people walking around with barely any clothes on, their ribs are showing, this and that. And it's like, then you realize why their country has been destabilized. What she emphasizes is that we are not different. We are going through the same struggles, the same oppression. She emphasizes this with the genocide that is going on in Palestine. She shows this by saying how the IDF trains police officers in America, how we send money to Israel so that they can then destabilize, demolish, and kill the Palestinians, and showing how we have to stop looking at things in individual terms. Everything is connected. Everything is connected. If you hit one domino, it's going to hit the next one. I wanted to end with this one, not only because of the timeline, but because of the hope and optimism that this left me with. And she kind of says that, yes, freedom is a constant struggle, and we have been struggling for a long time, but we have made it through. We have made it here, which means that we can keep going. There will always be work to do, but we are working, and that is what is important. I'm currently reading the 100 Years War on Palestine, and I'm going to keep educating myself. Right now is the time to be educated. We have to stop dividing ourselves, because I feel like that is one of the most beneficial things that the people, the higher ups, the wealthy, the people in power ever did, was to show us all of the things that divide us. And we have to stop doing the work for them. That was emphasized for me when I was reading about history for a class, and how the poor white people and black people were realizing, like, hey, we're kind of going through the same stuff. Let's link up together. There was a rebellion that I can't remember the name of, but at that point, they then were given some power, some money, some land, some to put them a step above Black people so that they were no longer in solidarity. And that is what they do to us. They separate us, make us realize our differences, and put some people up while putting some others down, so that there's always this hierarchy that we're trying to attain, this dream that we're trying to attain. And we have to stop doing the work for them. Simple as that. That is all I have today. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you have some books that you're hoping to check out. Like I said earlier, if you've read in these books, let me know what you felt about them. And if you have any that you think I might enjoy, please drop them down below. Always in my face, talking this.